Welcome to How to Be the Difference with your hosts, Johanna and Paul. A podcast for the career you want, or maybe just that push you need. If you want to know what your dream career looks like, join us to get inspiration from industry experts that will make that dream career a reality. Hello and welcome to How to Be the Difference with your hosts, Johanna Molina
and Paul Lynskey.
Paul, how are you today?
I'm a little bit under the weather, Johanna. I'm not going to lie. I think it's more seasonal than the other thing, the other big pandemic thing that's been floating around. I think it's just a bit of a cold. But how are you?
Very good, very good. Yes, I hope it's just a cold, but in today's world, only a cold also makes you very, very worried. I'm very well. Thank you.
And I have to start off by saying happy birthday. It was your birthday over the weekend.
Last weekend. Yes, it was my birthday, and thank you also for sending me such a lovely message. It was 7 p.m. Colombia, already midnight in Ireland, and you were the very first one to congratulate me. That was very special. Thank you. I don't necessarily make a big deal of my birthdays, but it's definitely a really beautiful day for people to actually, I don't know, say beautiful things to you. It just feels so great. So it was beautiful because of that.
Excellent. No, I love that I was able to do that, because for once I'm in the future over here, because it's usually like if you've got friends or something like that in Australia or on that side of the world, it's always them seeing the new year. And also it was great to see that and get a message in early at 12 p.m. Irish time.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Johanna, go ahead and introduce our guest this week.
This week we have Cezar Salazar. Cezar is a serial entrepreneur. He founded directly more than 6 companies so far, and he has invested in more than 100 early stage companies in Latin America. Cezar is an authority in entrepreneurship and the venture capital world in LATAM. One of his previous companies, Mexican VC, was the first Silicon Valley seed fund dedicated to Mexican startups. And then he sold Mexican VC to 500 startups, a well-known global venture capital firm. Cezar has changed careers multiple times and currently is the founder and CEO of Beyond Debt, which connects the most creative problem solvers in Mexico with the brightest founders in the US. And we are so happy to have you here, Cezar. How are you today? Whereabouts in the world are you?
Oh, thank you, Johanna and Paul. I'm doing very well right now. I'm in Mexico City, where I was born and raised. And I don't currently live here, but every time that I get an opportunity to come here, I get to enjoy all of the entrepreneurial activity and the food and the wonderful sidewalks with all of the trees. So if you haven't visited, you must.
Amazing. So tell us your story. How did you get to where you are today? Take us through your journey.
Thank you. Do you want the short, the medium, or the long version?
No, tell us the story as you want, but from the very beginning. I was born.
I was born a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And I think the start of my story is usually, we can talk about our parents, right? So I was born in a middle-class family where we had our basic needs covered, but nothing more. And my parents are creative types. They were the first generation of professionals in our families. My mom is an industrial designer. My dad is an architect. Both were university professors. And so I was brought up as a creative type. My parents were very interested in the intellectual development. They wanted me to be curious about the world, and I was lucky to have that upbringing because we only had our basic needs covered and nothing else. I also had a lot of curiosity how the world worked for other people. So I think travel also became something big in my life. I really wanted to explore other things. And as I started earning my own money and I started experiencing the world, just try to see different perspectives. And in college, I went, I was trained as an engineer, an industrial engineer, but I never considered myself an industrial engineer. I did consider myself like a mix between a software engineer, which like I learned to code in high school, and a designer that I learned while I was growing up. So that was the start of a career of changes and diverse decisions that led me to try different things.
That's amazing, and that was like a nice backdrop. Just before this, we started talking and we started recording here, and we were talking about your indecisiveness and our indecisiveness, really, about jumping from career to career. So how did you manage to get now in this professional life, or this where you are at this current moment? How did you end up getting there?
It's interesting that you ask this, because I remember this Steve Jobs commencement speech at Stanford, where he says that you can only connect the dots looking backwards. And it is so true. So right now, 20 years into my career, it's very easy to tell you how it happened. When it was happening, I didn't know. I didn't have a clue. And I just, I guess I just followed my intuition and took some risks. So I think the story, if I look at it from today and back, I was trained as an engineer. My parents trained me as a designer, and I started using those skills in the like building digital products. I was an entrepreneur. I worked with some companies. Sometimes, like, I built a company, didn't work, then took on unemployment, then that didn't work. Then I started another company, then employment again. But in all of those situations, I was using my skills as an engineer, as a designer. At the time, I was a very socially anxious person. I had a lot of trouble connecting with other humans. And there's this moment in 2008, that's already 13 years ago. I'm 25 years old, and I visit Silicon Valley for the first time. And I visited, and first person that I met there helped me by saying, the only way you will really get a wonderful experience from your visit here is if you go to all these events, if you meet people, if you are curious about like just what's happening in the real like world experience of the humans of like they're building this. So he pointed me into some directions. I went to some events, and I met this guy who was a speaker at a conference, who was also doing hackathons back in the day, who was doing this just for fun, was building community. And I got really inspired with that. And I guess I connected that with my experience of like, I need to connect with more humans, and like running hackathons and doing community seems to be a great way of doing that. And he inspired me to start doing that in Mexico. So he was like, hey, why don't you start doing hackathons yourself? I was like, but because I don't have the social skills to do that, and I don't have the network to do that. Like, I can find a lot of different reasons why I am not the right person to be doing those events. He's like, well, use this as your excuse to develop these skills, and you will see that it's not that difficult. You start with like a couple of people, and then, well, those two will invite another two, and then they will invite another two, and all of a sudden, I mean, you will have a small community. And it happened. So that led to me co-organizing hackathons every month. We had like over 100 attendees at some point. Those were spread into different parts of the country. So at some point, like 15 different cities were doing that. And I got really involved in this like community building and like helping others, connecting, other people helping me. And that led to one moment when one of my, this same friend said, hey, it looks like, I mean, you have all this community, but where are the investors? And I was like, investors? What do you mean? Like, what do you mean investors? Like, I was like, yeah. In Silicon Valley, we have all the people who are creating things, and we have the investors who are putting money into those things. And then the result of that is companies growing. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And she's like, well, if nobody's investing here in Mexico, if nobody has approached you yet, you have all this community, nobody has approached you. That means that there are no investors, basically, that have a clue about where to find talent. So why don't we start investing? And again, I had all like this big list of reasons why not to be us. Like, we don't know anything about finance. We don't have money. We don't know people with money. And he's like, we can figure that out. Let's just try it. He was like, I think we have what is the most difficult thing, which is we know people creating interesting products, solving interesting problems, and we know how to tell the ones that are real from the ones that are faking it. And that's what it takes. Everything else will get sorted out. And so we started a venture fund. And I went into a beautiful adventure of starting to invest in startups. Then our fund got acquired by another fund that ended up being the most active venture fund in the world at that time by number of investments, called 500 Startups. And I got to be a partner in that fund, and I got to participate in expanding this model of investing in young people to like dozens of countries. Myself in particular in Latin America, but my partners like looking at 50 different countries. And so that was the next step. And so I had already developed the hard skills of like knowing how to build products, knowing how to design, and then the quote unquote soft skills or more core skills of connecting with humans, knowing how to build communities, knowing how to deal with incentives. Why do people with money want to put their money here? Why do people who have ideas want to take that money? Under what terms? What makes that partnership successful? So I developed that too. And then I collapsed. Then I was like, this is too much. I was super burned out and I had to stop. And I went back to design. And I said, like, I want a simple life. I want to just design products. That was the next step. And I think now I'm trying to combine all of that. I'm trying to combine all of that in building this community for people who are creatives, for people who are trying to figure it out, people who are trying to participate in global teams, and who are finding that it's not that obvious. Like when you're trying to collaborate with people in different parts of the world, you have to develop new skills. We have to be more mindful about the needs of others. You have to communicate better. You have to like clear your thinking, have better mental models. And as you do that, you start getting an opportunity to be this like global citizen, like fully participating in the creation of the future. So that's what I'm doing now.
Wow. Okay. Before I go to my question, I want to quickly say to our audience, you mentioned hackathons, and maybe some of them don't know what it is. And so a hackathon is essentially an event where people get together to engage in different collaborative computer programming. Is that right?
That is correct. I think it's important, like the concept of the hackathon, what's important about it is that people gather to build stuff together and learn together. And they come from a place where it's all about code, but they have like now there are versions of hackathons for different things where people get together to design something or to solve a problem or to, I don't know, grow plants. Literally, it's just like this idea of, hey, why don't we bring people who care about the same things into the same room for the same at the same time, so they can learn from each other and they can show their experiments to others. So that's the vibe. And I mean, for the audience, if you go Google Hackathon and you find one in your city and you want to participate, generally speaking, they're very open environments where you can come as a beginner And you will find that people embrace beginners and they will help you navigate the space so that you can be part of that community.
Amazing. That's fantastic. In your story, I hear a lot of vulnerability, a lot of self-awareness, curiosity, adaptability, resilience. You mentioned things like, I probably don't have the social skills, or I probably am not the right person. And you were getting out of your comfort zone over and over again. What was the most difficult part of actually pushing through, breaking through? You mentioned mental models. What are those mental models or that you used to actually follow through and break through?
That's a beautiful question. And I think the answer has changed through time. Because I used to look at the biggest challenge as something that was external to me. So I would have, a few years ago, I would have said, well, the most challenging thing about doing a venture fund was raising money. Or the most difficult thing about building a design studio was finding clients. Or the most difficult thing about doing hackathons was like finding an audience, right? But the more I get perspective, the more I see that the biggest challenge was dealing with myself. And I think that we all have fears. In my case, I was afraid of not being enough. I was afraid of not being accepted in a group, of not belonging. I had a fear of things all at a sudden collapsing. And you know, when people say like, what if I lose it all? What if I end up in the streets? There was a fear, to be honest, of not being loved. Like, what if people don't love what I'm doing? What if people think that it's stupid? What if the people think that this is not the right thing to do? So when I look back, every time that I was in trouble, it was because one of these fears was manifesting and I was overpowering every other part of myself. And the moments when I was starting to succeed was when I was overcoming the fear, at least temporarily, and my creativity would shine, my ability to connect with humans would shine, my ability to communicate would shine because I was not afraid. So that's the most challenging part. And I don't think, I mean, I don't know if it ever ends, but I don't think so. Like I go like still talk to my therapist and it's like, I thought I had already figured this out like a few years ago, and apparently I haven't yet. So it's a constant process of like working on yourself and really trying to get, I don't know necessarily get rid of, but like really letting your true self shine through all of the things that you're not your true self. I mean, including those fears and those anxieties and maybe some anger or some reaction to the world. I think I was also being very reactive. I was like, the world shouldn't be like that. Politics should be this other way, versus being like, well, how do I channel what I have to say? And then maybe just gather some people around that, and maybe we'll just build an alternative. And if the alternative is good enough, well, people will start maybe adopting it, and they will feel connected to that. And if it's not good, then they won't. And we get a chance to start again.
Absolutely. And something you said there, which was like, why does the world have to be this way or like that? And I suppose like that leads me on to like, could you tell us a little bit about Beyond Dev? And it seems like it's very close to your heart, and it's inspiring and helping Mexican engineers and designers. And I was looking at the website, and it says, well, I translated it to English, and it says focusing a lot on working as first-class citizens. Could you tell us what that means?
Yeah. I think what some of our countries have a history of taking on the dirty work, right? In countries like Mexico, historically, our development model was, well, I mean, the US needs to manufacture cars. So we will manufacture the parts and we'll manufacture then the cars. But up to this day, even though we build all of the cars for Volkswagen and for Ford and for Chrysler and for Toyota, there's no Mexican brand of cars, even though we have all of the know-how. We build those cars from like end to end. And I think it speaks about a second-class citizen mentality where the only place that some people can take in the world is developing other people's ideas. And I think what it means to be a first-class citizen is to recognize that you have something to say and that your story is powerful and that you can share that story with others. And that by sharing that story with others, by expressing who you are, you get to interweave yourself into this tapestry of the future. And that is way more powerful. So, but that needs certain skills. That especially needs a perspective where you get rid of some narratives of like oppression and like just doing the dirty work, and you start seeing that you have something to say, that you are an artist too, that you are an intellectual too, that you have this spiritual self, and you start sharing that, and then you learn to communicate better. You learn to model your ideas in a way that people who are not from your culture understand, and you start leading in a way that you listen to others. So when other people feel listened, then you get to lead that conversation. So those are the skills that they're learning in this community, and that's why it's close to myself. And you were mentioning this Mexico and US thing, but that's where we're starting. But my assumption is that this is relevant in other contexts. So hopefully it's us or others who are working on these things in the future. And when we look at the picture in 10, 20 years, the world feels more interweaved, and it's no longer designed in California, built in China, but it's more like designed by all of us in the world, for all of us in the world.
Yeah, and you mentioned global citizen, and I think that's what we're all becoming. Like myself and Johanna are in two different continents, and we talk more than most people, and we have this podcast as well. But it must be incredibly inspiring for you, and like seeing some of the projects going on around you and seeing the talent that's around you. Was there a proudest moment for you?
Yeah, the proudest moment for me, I think, from so one point in my story, I was involved with the Startup Weekend community. That's also all about like spreading entrepreneurship and creating spaces where people can experiment with this idea of creating companies. And I was an organizer, co-organizer of the first Startup Weekend here in Mexico City. And from there, we helped spread it to Mexico, long story that leads to a lot of adventures. But my proudest moment is every time that now I learn about a story of somebody who met their co-founder in Startup Weekend, or met their spouse in Startup Weekend, or is now they met their spouse and now they built a family and now they have a baby because of that. So I think in a way it's funny to me, because if you had asked me this 10 years ago, I would have projected maybe something more connected to material success. I invested in this unicorn company, or like, I don't know, like we returned X amount of capital to our investors. And even though I'm proud of that, I think those are good metrics to know that we've been making progress. I'm really the most proud when I see that there is a deeper meaning to all these things that we're doing, and that this ends up in friendships and in love and in new projects and experiments and like, I don't know. And that's how I met, I mean, Eduardo, who introduced us. I met him through Startup Weekend. And so now, right now, I'm here talking to you because of that. So we can count this as one of my proudest moments.
This is so cool how all the dots get connected. You come from a family of teachers, you said. So you've been really close to education and the educational sector from a young age. How will you say technology has facilitated that, or what is your vision on education?
Oof, that's also a very good question. Now I understand that I got to be disappointed with the system before even going through the system. I think my parents were playing by the rules, but I think they were already noticing that the system was relatively broken and that the emphasis of education was in the wrong places. As an example, I can use my mom. She was teaching design to freshmen or French people in college. And she was supposed to do that. And instead of that, she was taking students out of the university into museums and watching movies and discussing travel. And just because I think her observation was they can't possibly design something interesting unless they are like learn to observe the world and be curious. So in a way, her class was something that she wasn't supposed to be teaching, but she was okay with that and she ran with it for decades. And my dad as well. I think he understood that the theory did not matter unless the students were asking themselves a lot of questions. And it was until they were asking themselves questions that they could then respond, some of them with the theory. So you can then assume that I have like very big critiques on the educational system, at least a traditional one as we experience it right now, because I believe that the emphasis on the wrong things. If I think of it from first principles, what I believe is important is to develop your curiosity, your ability to learn, like learn to understand what you don't know, and then learn to ask yourself questions, and then learn how to start solving that, how to connect with other humans that probably already have the answer, so you can shortcut that process, learn to run experiments, learn to fail, learn to be okay with the different outcomes of an experiment. Then learn to have the emotional capacity for love and connection, and appreciation for the world, learn to appreciate beauty. And then I think there's this idea of, sorry, like I just went into this big rabbit hole. But there's this ability to turn your life into a learning experience, which is probably too cliche at this point, because we keep talking about like lifelong learning and like learning every day, but it's so true. And I see the differences so much with people who like clearly their life experience is a learning experience versus people who went through a learning phase and now they're supposed to know how to live, and they're completely different life experiences. One leads to incredible levels of satisfaction, and one, I don't know, I haven't been in that one, but from the outside, it looks a bit depressing, to be honest. It looks like people seem to be stuck and seem to be being the victims of the things that are happening around them. It's a very disempowering way of living. So we need to completely redesign the mainstream learning experience all the way from age 0 to age 100.
I completely agree. And you've been very open and honest with the conversation so far. And you said that like you had to take a step back at one stage because it just became too much for you. And we would have a lot of people who would listen in, and not just the education side of things, but people who may want a career change and may think things are just a little further from their grasp. You've already said, like, and Johanna, I think, could echo it, and myself as well, that like sometimes you doubt yourself. So those people who are looking for a career change, what's the best advice you could give them?
It's a scary. I think in my experience, what was scary is, what if it doesn't work and I end up losing what I already had? I think that's the simplest way of putting it. And it sounds so true. And and at the same time, there's almost no possible way that happens. And that would be my message. Like, first, it's very likely that it doesn't work. So don't worry about that. Like, it's the most likely thing that will happen is that when we try to switch, it will not work. But the second part is very false, which is, and if that happens, then I will lose everything that I have. You will not lose what you have. You already are who you are. And what there's only things that you will gain. You will gain this other experience. I cannot count the number of times that people say, oh, I have this very good job, and if I quit that job and I go into this different career, what if it doesn't work? And they will never take me back. And my answer is, have you asked them? And they're like, well, of course not. Why would I? It's like, well, because that's the one thing that you want to know, if they would take you back. And it's surprising how many times when people talk, the answer that they get is just like, well, of course we would take you back. You're very talented. That's why we keep you, right? Like we've kept you because you're talented. So if you go explore and then it doesn't work, well, I mean, we don't know if there will be a like exact same job, right? Like maybe we'll have hired somebody else to do this, but we will think about it. And if for whatever reason there's no place here, we can recommend you to other places. Like, and there's usually so much appreciation for the thoughtful process of moving around and exploring. I think and by the way, when that doesn't happen, when people say, oh, we would never take you back, then you already have your answer. That's not the right place for you. You're in a very toxic environment where people don't value your existence. They value your role into their existence. And that's it. And that's no way of living. Like a good way of living is a place where you can contribute to somebody else's existence while they contribute to yours, and there's value that's exchanged between the different humans. So if that's the answer, you can safely say, I need to change. I need to try new things because this is not the right place.
Awesome. What gets you out of bed in the morning?
A good cup of coffee. I only say it house jokingly. I think I make my own coffee. I pour my coffee in a V60. For those that don't know it, it's just a plastic cone with a paper filter on top, and you can like pour some water on top of the coffee slowly and measure the amount of you measure the amount of coffee in grams and the amount of like water in milliliters, and after that you have a wonderful cup of coffee. And really, that's what wakes me up in the morning. And I think it is the appreciation of like that first taste of my morning and the mindfulness that I put into it, and knowing like the world is much more than work. The world is much more than the tasks that are in front of me. It's about stopping and smelling the roses. In this case, stopping and smelling the coffee. That really wakes me up in the morning. If I don't have that, and if I just go directly into my work, as exciting as it is, as connected as I feel with it, I think I sometimes can get too absorbed in it to a point that I forget why the work was important in the first place.
That is amazing. I've got the same coffee machine, but like not the same routine. So I'm definitely going to change it up. So, that was amazing. So I suppose just to end, I suppose, what's next for you? What's coming up? What's coming down that you're excited about?
Oh, I'm excited about communities in general. I'm excited about the Web3. For those that haven't heard, like the web, the internet keeps evolving, and it keeps evolving from a technology perspective. There are new technologies that we have at hand that we can build with, but there are also new paradigms, new cultural conversations that are happening about what is the role of this technology and the way we humans connect with each other and the way we build our society and the way we take care of our planet, etc. So the one thing I am more curious about right now is that we're going from a web, like an internet that was all, the business model was to put advertising on things. So it was all about grabbing attention. That was model number one. And model number two, once we had the payment platforms to start doing transactions, we not only started like doing e-commerce, but also we started paying for music, like through Spotify and other platforms. We started paying for movies through Netflix and other platforms. And we started paying for a lot of things on the internet. So it became valuable to build a business through a paid service. So even though attention is still important, what's more important is consumption. And that's model number two. It's slightly better than just grabbing attention, but it's not the most evolved way of living, if you ask me. And we're going into this process of a next step that is where it seems that it will be easier to share ownership. So it means that instead of paying for a service, we will be able to invest in the service and then get the service. One of the things that we will get in return is the service itself. But the second thing is that because we're invested in the service, we will get to participate in building that service, in voting on how that service evolves, and in getting rewarded when that service becomes big. So it seems that that's where we're going. That's what the Web3 is all about. And I'm excited about that. I don't think that that's the end state of civilization, but it feels so refreshing as the next step in how way more humans participate in owning a small piece of everything that they find interesting, that they want to consume. So they go from consumers to stakeholders, to full participants. And I think hopefully that is the next step in everybody being a true creator. So I'll try to build some of that in a service that we're building beyond.dev. And I'm excited about seeing what others build around that idea.
Your enthusiasm, your excitement, it's infectious. It's been absolutely inspiring having you today. Cesar Salazar, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you,
Thank
Cesar.
you, Paul. Thank you, Johanna. It was wonderful. I think that the work that you're doing, empowering people to experience the world, to test new waters, to participate in companies, to figure out who they are, is incredibly important. And that's why I'm here. I wanted to spend some time with you because I find your mission inspiring, and I wish you the best. And I hope everybody who's listening this also wants to keep experimenting and keep building.
Thank you so much.
And that was Cesar. What an absolutely lovely guy, wasn't he, Johanna? Really positive, really upbeat, and I just really enjoyed that chat.
Yes, I also really, really enjoyed. Thank you so much, Paul, and thank you, Cesar.
Yes, and thank you too as well, Johanna. And you can reach us at howtobethedifference at theinterngroup.com or on social media at the Intern Group. And also, if you could, wherever you get your podcasts, please leave a rating or review and subscribe. And until next time, thanks a million.
Thank you very much. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.